And here we go again. It's hot in here. Very, very, very hot. The main culprit is that Elgato key light here just blasting my face. But it's a hot spring there. Look at this. This is like the Australian heat coming right through. And then I have black blankets everywhere for sound treatment. Fun stuff. It is 12 o'clock. I'm going to invite Mr. John Myers to do another episode of The Nav Bar about remix. Let's go. What am I doing? What do I have to do? Please tell me. Oh yeah, I have to copy the URL of this stream. There it is. I can invite John. You can join the same link as before. And I'm going to make the tweet while he's joining. And appears here. Because I assigned him to number 1. Oh my god, 20 plus notifications on Twitter. I'll check it later. We're back at it for yet another recording. Let's allow the man in to... He hung up? What? There. Ta-da!
Me. Ready to go. Aww.
I'm just doing the tweet. We're back at it for yet another recording of The Nav Bar.
Here we go.
There's production pipeline over here.
Yeah. We even do our own sound effects, as you can hear from there. We've got our own delay.
Echo.
And distortion.
Can you tell I've had a little bit more coffee?
Coffee! Yeah, you missed my intro about remix. I was talking to myself like while you were joining the call, and sunstroke and coffeed up. This time, John Myers and I will be talking about remix.com.
We need air horns for this one. Can you bring up air horns on your... No. Oh, you've got one, don't you?
I know you have... And...
Need air horns.
And woo! And good old stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
A motherfucking nav bar. Oh, yeah. We're allowed to swear on YouTube. We're just not allowed to swear on the podcast.
I want to monetize, make millions of the YouTube stream. No, I don't. We can't. We need 4,000 hours of viewage first. John Myers and I will be talking about Remix Run. What's the remix emoji? Someone juggling.
A CD.
Oh, of course. The CD that is everywhere in the docs. Kenzie does love them emojis. I know he's not on the team anymore, but the legacy of the emojis is there. Okay, link to the live stream. Oh, bam. Bam! I have 20 plus notifications that I will not check now. But I will Slack you the link so you can Slack the Slack.
And I have one notification. Thanks for rubbing it in.
Yeah, I'm just part of the 20 plus. You'll know when you get to 20 plus. That's every time you go on Twitter, it says 20 plus. You're like, minus
20 plus group.
And then it's 20 plus the same person says, check DM, help, please. No, not please. Check DM, need help.
Yeah.
Look at my timeline if you wonder what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about.
I get DMs all the time that are just like, how do I do this thing that I very easily could have Googled?
Yeah, so apparently a post CSS is broken because Tailwind doesn't deploy. So I have to help.
Oh, it's your fault.
Apparently,
you broke it. Why'd you break it?
Balked it. On Sunday, of like classic weekend, that's when you break it. Okay. We're losing followers by being old and salty and Cynical. What is remix? We have one person watching, and it's me.
All right. Yeah. Sorry, everyone. We've started the stream, but
Record. Sip of water.
Hang on,
Are we not at the sip of water?
We're not there yet. Hang on.
You got some Slack waiting you.
Oh my god. I've opened the link and it's us talking at me with multiple layers of it.
When it comes, when it comes in your headphones with the delay, it's like your brain stops, like you can't do anything until you find the mute button.
Yeah.
So I'll go through my 20 plus notifications while you do your peasant things.
I'm responding to our fans, telling them that we're live again and to come and learn about Remix.
Remix.
Because Jeremy missed us live talking about Next.js, and so I'm letting him know that we are live again talking about Remix.
One of my tweets is a notification is everyone getting pumped up about the recordings that I lost. not about the fact that I lost, but I tweeted the screenshot of this like really cool stuff, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is just what I need," and I'm like.
Thank you. I'm glad my pain and suffering can entertain you.
Well, they see it, they don't know that it disappeared. I tweeted it before seeing that I didn't have the recording.
Oh, right.
Oh, well.
Developer advocacy. Let our pain and suffering entertain you.
You know when something hits a nerve and you can see everyone gets really into it? It's like, oh, that's something there's demand for. Well, that's the thing, but I've lost the...
It's just another reminder of
yeah.
how much excitement there is for the thing that you don't have to give them.
Yes.
It's excellent. For anyone that has joined us, we're not actually bitter and angry about everything.
No,
I'm
really fun. We're really fun. And
Please don't leave. Please don't leave us alone.
We actually
don't leave me alone with Simon.
We're actually fun and lighthearted and positive. We humans, we have brains. We choose to do them just after tweeting the live link. But that's what are you typing like a 200-word Medium post?
Yeah. No, I'm just writing my thesis. It's yeah. Oh man, have you ever had to write a thesis? Did you do like a uni thesis?
Yes.
Yeah. No, we talked about this.
You listened to my story or what? I was
there. I didn't listen. I was just present for your story.
I was nodding.
Yeah, that's right. I was nodding while responding to my tweets off screen. No, oh my god, that was intense writing my thesis. Oh my god, so long, so long. Yeah. What is it, like 100,000 words? Is that what it is, or is it 10,000 words? It's 100,000 words, right?
A lot.
It's too much. It was way too much. But I totally attribute my ability to be a
eloquent
developer advocate and like articulate things and communicate well
to writing a thesis.
To writing my thesis. I feel like before that, like I was terrified of any kind of written stuff because it was definitely not my strong suit. And it was kind of like I pushed myself to do, like I had the choice of doing honors, which was like thesis based and research based, or a master's, which was more like coursework based. So I could have done either, and I kind of like pushed myself to do honors because the idea of writing such a big piece of written work scared me so much. I'm very glad I did, because I feel like I learned so much.
You did. Did you have to in Switzerland? You have to do like the thesis, and then you have a in-person presentation, like 15 minutes, where you present it and get grilled by the expert. And
yeah. And then that was apparently like what made up my mark or whatever. Like they had a significant amount to do with. Man. All right, look, we're not bitter. We're happy. We're the Number Podcast. Woo! Wacky Simon and John are here to tell you about web development and content creation.
Let me check. We have 0. Oh, we have 3 people watching this.
Oh, I'm sorry, everyone. All right, we'll get to the podcast.
Yes. But before, hey, you didn't-
Sorry. So we
have that thing where we have to synchronize drink to not jinx the podcast, and I've been waiting while he's typing a thesis, and now he just goes and drink with that.
Our podcast nearly got haunted for a second there. All
Ready?
right, here we go. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Oh yeah.
I hope everyone in the chat joined us for that sip of water. You got to stay hydrated both at the start of the podcast and throughout. Otherwise, you won't learn as much. The way that you learn is by staying hydrated and listening to the Navbar podcast.
It actually is.
All right. And now, watch me transition into professional John. Transition into @JohnMyers_IO on Twitter and host the Navbar podcast.
Yeah. Let's do this. Look, watch John morph from like bubbly coffee to like.
Just gotta make it more serious. We're here to learn today.
Enough
We're here
of
to
the
learn
silliness.
about web development and content creation.
Let's do one
Can't do
without smiling the whole time.
yeah. Let's see how far me and you get without. Welcome to the Navbar. Okay, yeah, there we go. Didn't even make it through.
The drony voice, like
Yeah,
you cannot change the note. It's gotta say everything. Like choose your note, like
Welcome
C sharp.
to the Navbar podcast, the podcast where we help you navigate the web and raise the bar for your content creation. My name is John Myers. I'm a developer. Can't do it. All right, here we go.
Ship it.
The real one. Let's learn about Remix.
Yeah.
Sorry for everyone's ears that just got
clapped.
popped. All right. That coffee's really kicking in, huh?
Just as I thought you were finally doing you.
I know, that's it. We're live. I mean, we're like, this is the podcast.
And we wonder
Sorry,
why
Simon,
we
I
do
did a solo sip.
we wonder why we do 1 hour recordings. If you
Mm.
want a fun fact, we are at 12 minutes of live.
Well, I only just remembered that I need to do a backup recording, so it's good that we've been horsing around, so I had enough time to remember that. All right, everyone. Chat, you ready? I'm ready. Simon, you ready?
Ready to react to John's comments about...
Excellent. And
Excellent.
I'm ready to... Quokka! I don't know what that means, but I'm ready to do it. All right. Kicking off the shoes. That means business time.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the Navbar, a podcast where you...
Shout out to Alex Page.
Yeah, Alex is telling us just... Come on, guys. Get with it. Let's go.
Alex is the big ticket from Shopify, so we better not mess up. I don't think they use Remix.
Okay. Alex, we will definitely become much more professional now and do it properly.
Alex and I rode a Tesla in San Francisco down the coast to Monterey, and that was brilliant. That was
awesome.
great. Yeah, that was cool. That's how we met. All right, enough.
The Tesla.
In San Francisco, we were going to ClarityConf and we were doing React training for Atlassian, and then Dominic, who worked with Alex before, they were like, "Hey, we both there. We should meet." And then we rented a Tesla with Jed, and that was sick.
Nice.
That's all you need to know. That was great.
Yep. Part 3 of Simon's origin story. Here we go.
We haven't started there. See, the little heart. He remembers.
All right, Alex is telling us enough with the coffee talk. All right, here we go. Navbar podcast coming up in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Navbar, a podcast where we help you navigate the web and raise the bar of your content creation. My name is John Myers. I'm a developer advocate from Supabase.
And I am Simon Vrashliotis, a designer, developer, content creator from Sydney, Australia. And in this episode, we're going to talk about Remix. Oh, I clipped. If you don't know what clipping a microphone sounds like, I just did it when it goes all fuzzy. Do you love it?
This is the remix episode. We are remixing your knowledge of web development, just like the team building remix is remixing how you build web apps.
This podcast is brought to you by two over-caffeinated developers, advocates. But I promise we're going to get into the good stuff. First of all, I want to ask you, because I know you've done cool stuff on the interwebs about Remix. What is a Remix?
So, Remix is another meta framework that's built on top of React. If you checked out one of our previous episodes, we talked about Next.js. And so, similarly to Next.js, Remix is built on top of React. So you can write React components, you can transfer any of that existing knowledge that you have if you do use React. But this one is, rather than being from Vercel, it is from the creators of React Router, Reach Router, and also React Training. And so this is Michael Jackson and Ryan Florence. Started the Remix project, and then, obviously there's a whole bunch of contributors along the way. And so this is an SSR-only framework, so a server-side rendered framework. So it doesn't do any static page generation stuff. It renders the page on the server and sends you the HTML, and then hydrates if you need to hydrate. And so the process of hydration is attaching all of the JavaScripty stuff and adding all of that interactivity. And so if you don't actually need JavaScript, then Remix doesn't actually need to ship any JavaScript at all. But if you opt into using JavaScript, then the page will hydrate and add all of that JavaScripty goodness. And so the best explanation that I've heard of what Remix is that Remix is web dev for boomers, or modern web dev for boomers, which I'm not sure if that's like a positive or negative way of describing it. I don't know like what the intention was by the people that said that, but I choose to take it as being like as modern as React, but as simple as PHP. PHP was, really made things a lot easier with things like file-based routing. Like if you wanted a page, you just create a file, and then you can navigate to that page. All of those things that were convenient and nice about PHP, but being able to do all of the modern things that you might need to do in a modern component-based framework like React.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. Like this boomers thing means like it's kind of like going back to previous things. So like you just said, for a while, you were doing everything on the server with PHP or other languages that brings a lot of simplicity. You just like do some data fetching and calculations and stuff, and then render a page and serve that. And then we were like, oh, but it sucks because we can't do like nice client-side interactivity and stuff. It's a bit more complicated. And so we moved like almost everything to the client. So you just load an empty div with an ID, and then you just like with JavaScript create a whole experience in the client. And then a lot of stuff that the server-side stuff made way simpler got so complicated and convoluted. And it feels like the industry is kind of like pivoting back to, hey, actually, that was pretty nice. And I like that Remix has that. Let's get the simplicity of PHP and server-side stuff, but then we can also load React in the client and do like stuff like optimistic UI and all like really elegant interactivity within the same concept. And people that have been in the web, around the web for long enough to have done it both ways kind of see this like circling back to the good stuff of server-side rendering.
Yeah.
Boomers.
Yeah, there's always kind of this dance between like client and server. So there's like do everything on the server side, like like Ruby and Rails and PHP and stuff like that, and then just give HTML across the wire. And then there's do everything front end, which is like the React just by itself world, where like everything is a single page application. You just you serve up basically a loading spinner, and then you go and get all of the data that you need for the page client side. And we're kind of seeing this shift back, well, kind of like the best of both worlds, which is nice. It's not just like a hard pivot back to the server. It's kind of like, well, some of that server side stuff is good and some of that client side stuff is good. So how do we mix them in together for the best user experience? And then with using a framework like Remix, then how do you also provide the best developer experience
it's
around
sort
that?
Of like artificial intelligence, where you feed the machine more and more data. And first we're like, server side is great, and then client side is really cool. You can do client side navigation, the sidebar stays, just the internal part changes. And then as you learn, you keep feeding data to the community, and the community kind of models this stuff that's brings the values and learnings from that and brings them together. So the more time goes and more frameworks try new things, the more you can model that new approach that kind of solves new problems that we didn't realize we would bump into. So yeah, I see Remix as this evolution of like, it's not just a pivot back or yank back or scratch that. Actually the last 10 years were silly. It's more like, no, there's really good reasons. Let's take these and bring the reasons we forgot about and kind of package them together.
Yeah. So why should you use Remix? Well, it gives you all of these server bits to kind of sprinkle throughout your code. So very similar to Next.js, where we had those like kind of little bits of server pieces that could run to do things like the things that only server stuff can do, like authentication, authorization, talking to a database, all of that stuff. You get these little server bits to sprinkle throughout without needing to maintain your own server. The other thing that is pretty cool about Remix is that it's very opinionated, in that, I mean, the developers of Remix are very opinionated about how you should just learn how to actually do these things with web standards, rather than creating these opinions around like how you should create an API to abstract away that thing. And so they kind of encourage like pushing to learn how to do it yourself over creating these like abstracted away convenience functions. So a good example of this is, rather than providing you a function like get static props, which is what you get in Next.js, and so when you call that function is basically called by Next.js on the server side, and you can build your application and go and fetch the data for your application at build time. Really, like what that's doing is abstracting away something called stale while revalidate, which is a caching header that you can basically achieve the same thing in Remix by just setting some caching headers. So by not creating this convenience function and giving it to you so that you only know how to use that one convenience function, the Remix team is their attitude is more like, you should learn how to do this with caching headers and just use the caching headers that are already built into the browser.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's one thing that actually got me to check Remix out, is there was that message. I think I watched a video from Ryan Florence, and he kept saying when you learn Remix, you actually learn reusable knowledge for, like, you can get a job at a completely different, not even JavaScript, like completely different stack. You will be like, oh, but I've learned about these things, like cache headers and like HTTP and like the web stuff. And they were saying like, you learn stuff and you will find yourself on the MDN documentations more often than not. And I thought, to me, that resonated, like that I'm always interested in learning new things, but I also don't want to oversaturate my brain with like knowledge specific APIs that only work in a specific framework. And I started trying Remix, and I was like, there's a few. I was actually pretty good with forms already, so I knew the form data and all that stuff. But then certain nuances, I was like, whoa, I had no idea this was a thing on the web. And I don't think I would have learned, because if there's an abstraction, like before another episode we did on Next.js, you were talking about get static props, and then you can pass like a revalidate, pass like a timeout stuff. And maybe that's setting up a SWR, like stale while revalidates cache header. I don't know how it's implemented, but like just giving you the raw, like, no, look on MDN, this is how you do it on the web, and we'd like you to do it that way instead of having a framework specific wrapper. And I think, yeah, that's really cool. That's what drew me and then made me stay and build some stuff with Remix, because it's true. You learn about web development and transferable skills come along the way. Yeah,
totally. And there are some things on the other side of that fence that are maybe a little bit frustrating as a developer. Like they don't have any kind of magic around making an environment variable available to the front end. And so in Next.js, if you've ever created like a .env file or a .env.local file, and you put in your environment variables in there, if you just have the name of the environment variable equals and then the value, that will only be available server side. If you want to like make it available client side so that you can use it in your component, then you need to prepend it with next_public_. So that's a really easy way to keep all of your environment variables like co-located, and just have the ones that you want to expose to the browser. You can kind of like, you can do that with a naming convention, and Next.js will take care of all the magic behind the scenes. Remix doesn't do anything like that. And the docs kind of dissuade you from doing that, but also provide you an example of how you can do it, just, using, again, the web and using, like, attaching it to the window because the window is available in the browser. So yeah, it's kind of like double-edged sword. There's some stuff that's really good to learn about how to do this properly, and then there's some other stuff like environment variables where you're just like, I just want an environment variable that's available everywhere. Just make it happen. But yeah, I think a lot of the educational resources, like you were saying, they usually focus around like teaching about the web, and especially teaching about the web like without just kind of smearing over everything with JavaScript. And so like you were saying with forms, I also, like, since PHP days, I don't think I've ever used a form properly until Remix. So I think I have only ever blocked the majority of what a form is actually doing for you. I've only ever like blocked that by doing, if you're not familiar, when you do like or event.prevent default, if you've ever done that when submitting a form, that's basically you saying, okay, browser, I don't want you to do any of the stuff. Just like stop here, and JavaScript is going to take over handling this. And it means that you have to write all of this custom stuff that the browser can actually handle by default. And we just got so used to doing that that I think we forgot about how like powerful forms actually are. And so it's really nice that things like Remix are like resurfacing what we can already actually do with the browser. Like we can just use caching headers in the browser, and we can just use actual like submitting forms to do things in the browser.
Yeah, typically, and I think that's what some people might think that prevent default does, is like the default behavior when you submit the form is it goes to another URL defined in the action, or it might just add some parameters and stuff. And like, so you build an app and you have your form, and then you want to do the onSubmit handler, and the first thing you want to do is say, no, don't go anywhere. I'm just gonna myself update data and navigate there. So you prevent defaults to, in your head, just not refresh the page or do something, but then you lose all of the, hey, like that thing you submitted, you can do tons of stuff with it. And again, that's what Remix brings. Say, hey, look at the form data thing on MDN and all the stuff that you can do. You can actually read all the values. You don't have to store them in a piece of state each and then compose your object and then send that. You can actually grab all the values and do the work, that the stuff that browsers do for you out of the box, that you throw away, like the throw the baby with the bathwater. It's the classic thing. Prevent default is like, I don't want none of that. I'm gonna from scratch implement what I need and miss out on all the other stuff that came for free.
Yeah, for sure. And so, yeah, I think like when you start writing Remix code and when you have to deal with a form, like it might feel a little bit unfamiliar and like you're doing all this stuff that you're not used to and it's more work than it's worth or whatever. But then you realize how much less code you're actually writing overall. Like you might be able to just submit a form faster by preventing default. But all of the other stuff that you get with that you then need to implement yourself is kind of handled for you by Remix. And I think that was kind of the path that I went down when I was learning Remix, or starting to kind of, watch videos that they were putting out about what Remix was. Watching the form stuff, I was like, I don't want to go back to using forms that way. Like I always just reach for a library like use React form or whatever, use React hook form. Yeah. And like, that just makes it easy. And like, I wasn't really sold on the form side of stuff. But then watching the video about like caching headers and how like, actually these things that are kind of abstracted away by other frameworks and make it look like that framework is the only thing that can do that. And you need to use their primitives to be able to achieve that thing, realizing that the browser already has this stuff. I think that's where it flicked for me. And I was like, oh no, I want to use this. I want to learn more about the web. Rather than just learning about one single platform.
Seems more transferable as the industry evolves. Like I don't think React is going anywhere anytime soon, or if the next evolution will carry a lot of what it does, but still like betting on knowing how the browser works. And like you always hear these like, oh, what if you disable JavaScript? Like most things on the web without JavaScript are pretty poor experience, and you kind of like, it's almost like saying, oh, disable CSS and just look at raw documents. And like it's not like you expect that someone turns JavaScript off or stuff, but it's still good that it actually, like the form submission you do in Remix if there's no JavaScript, it still works because it submits the form and the browser knows. You might not be able to hijack the experience and then do optimistic UI and client-side navigation that like Remix lets you do, which I'm sure you're going to talk about. But the raw experience, you can just have a form. And if JavaScript is here, it takes over. And if not, it still works. It submits the form and it works. Where your React implementation, if it's not someone disabled JavaScript, but something breaks JavaScript somewhere and it doesn't load, it can even be the network. Yeah, it hasn't finished loading or something. Like nothing is gonna work. So in that term, the progressive enhancement of doing Remix approach is really, really nice.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's the big use case you're working for. It's, if people want to disable JavaScript, they're on their own. They can deal with pages failing and not working. But yeah, what you're trying to protect yourself from are the people that, like, yeah, they have JavaScript turned on, but just something happened and it crashed and then the whole page didn't load. So moving on to like some of, I guess, the philosophies of Remix and what's included in Remix. I think one of the big philosophies is shipping less JavaScript. So it's not shipping no JavaScript. It's not anti-JavaScript, but just like, what do you actually need to ship? And not just what do you need to ship, but like how much of your application can work without JavaScript if something does go wrong. So this makes it way faster to load because you're not shipping a whole bunch of additional JavaScript. You're just basically shipping the HTML that you actually need, and then you're opting into to hydrating that page with JavaScript and all of the React-y things. But this means that it still works if JavaScript fails. And things like submitting forms in that way, like if you're preventing default and then you're handling everything in JavaScript, if something there crashes, just nothing happens. Whereas if your JavaScript fails somewhere, then if you're using the primitives of the web and being able to submit that form using the browser, then it can still do that. And it can still like send a post request off to one of the Remix server bits that we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, it will all still work if JavaScript happens to fail, doesn't break everything. But yeah, the team are definitely not like anti-JavaScript. They understand that like JavaScript improves the UX for a lot of people. It allows you to do a lot of accessibility stuff that you can't do otherwise. And obviously just like making dynamic web apps that people expect from every website they go to.
Yes.
And so like, it's not that the team is against JavaScript. It's just that there are... that by doing everything in JavaScript, you're kind of exposing yourself to having to write a lot of that custom stuff yourself, which you probably just won't write, and then you'll get random errors happening. And yeah, if something does happen, the rest of your application is broken. So Ryan explained it really well in a conference talk that I saw recently, where it's kind of like having two islands. So it's like you have the server and the client, and the server is like the server island is filled with all of the like vegetables and like the grains and like the things that are good for you that you need to like your body needs to survive. And then the other island is just like all lollies and sweets and chocolate and like all the delicious like indulgent things in the world. And so like both islands are important. You can't just have all vegetables and just like, block yourself off from the rest of all of the nice things, all of the indulgent things in life. But if you only eat all of those indulgent things, you probably won't have much life to enjoy without the vegetables and the healthy stuff. And so what Remix is trying to do is creating a portal between those two. So rather than them being these really completely separate islands, you might be over on Vegetable Island, you might be making a stir fry, and then you're like, oh, I need some... something sweet for this. I need some brown sugar for this delicious stir fry. So I'm going to take the portal across to the server side and grab those bits that I need. And then, the other way around. Take a portal across to the client and then bring back the bits I need to make that stir fry delicious, which I think is a really cool way of explaining those two different concepts.
Yeah, Ryan is definitely really good at explaining concepts. Before, when we were talking about the stale while revalidated, made me think of a video that I recommend everyone to watch. It's about cache headers and the different implementation. And Ryan has that emoji kind of labels. Like there's the person that gets the fresh version that's happy, and the one that has to wait. So it's like a yawn emoji. and one gets the stale version. So I forgot the emoji, but there's he uses emoji to convey really, really easily like what happens and in different implementation and like strategies to, should I just serve static stuff all the time, but then people get outdated stuff, or this thing where as soon as someone has a stale version, they get that stale version, but it's just one person, and then in the background it kind of gets the new version, and so the next one will have the new one, and all these approaches. And again, like you think you need some APIs to be able to do that, but the web HTTP has like lots of stuff already built in. And yeah, that was the best video I've ever seen. Like it made so many concepts that I had very blurry in my mind super clear, because I could see the emoji and the scenarios where the data has to be fetched from the server and the person waits. And yeah, it's a really cool video. We'll put it in the show notes that might exist one day.
Those show notes, those magical show notes, it'll totally be there. But yes, that video is awesome and was definitely the thing that, like, yeah, I think steered me to wanting to try Remix out more and spend a lot more time with it. So some of the things that that Remix bundles up for you, like what the framework actually gives you outside of React, is file-based routing. So this is similar to Next.js or Gatsby or a lot of most web framework tools at the moment have moved across to this idea of file-based routing. And so the idea is, if you need a route in your application, you want like an about page or something like that, you just create a file for it called about.ts or about.js. You know, return some JSX from that, and then when you navigate to that page, you see that JSX, or you see that that HTML rendered out. And so, yeah, this is like very reminiscent of the days of PHP, where it's just like, you need a route, you just create a file for it, and it's called about.php, and then it's just there. Which is, yeah, much more convenient way of dealing with routing, rather than like maintaining a separate routing file and doing all of this extra plumbing and stuff yourself to kind of tell the browser, or tell your, you know, to set up these conventions in your application to decide where all of these things should live and what is a page and what is a regular component. All of these things that I remember spending hours and hours and days and weeks doing in my job when I was like working on React full time before these like server sprinkling frameworks existed. And yeah, just the amount of time we would spend talking about conventions of where to store things and how to do all of it. And like trying out different things and changing it and refactoring our whole application. Like, none of that needs to happen, because it's just like there is a convention there where everything in that routes folder is a separate page in your application.
It's a really intuitive convention, and it's caught up with like all like you said, all frameworks do it. So it's very likely someone arrives in the project. Like if it's called pages, it even hints to it, but most projects have it, they might call it different. It might be routes or something, but it's the concept is here to stay, I think, because it's so intuitive. And it's like, if you just build a few HTML pages and you want to serve them, you can do that. Or PHP used to do that, as it still does it. I shouldn't say use. PHP is a very modern language and produces vast majority of websites still, and is not going anywhere. And yeah, I think it's nice to bring that simplicity into JavaScript, where we kind of overcomplicated it a bit, arguably, and now like course corrected to something using that convention. I really like that.
Yeah. So in terms of like data fetching server-sidey bits, Remix has something called a loader. And so a loader is similar to get server-side props in Next.js, if you're familiar with Next.js. But it's just a function that you export from your component file. So you keep it alongside the component that uses it at the route level component. So for example, our about.ts page or whatever, we would export a loader from there. And then that's a function that's going to be called by Remix and runs on the server before mounting the component or before rendering it on the server. So because all of that like data fetching logic is happening on the server side, it means in our component we don't need to handle all of these different states. We don't need to handle a loading state, because the data will just be fetched as the component is being loaded. So we make a request for about.ts. The first thing that happens is that loader is called. It might go off to the database and go and get all of the data that page needs. And then it will render our a version of our component on the server. So the first render of our application happens on the server. And then that data is that data is available to us if we call the hook use loaded data. So inside our component, we call use loaded data, and then we have whatever that function returned for our first render. So the reason that I'm like going on about this first render stuff is that's something that trips up a lot of people about whether they need to, like from the React world, if you were to go and fetch data from your server, you'd probably have that logic in something like useEffect. And then that is something that gets triggered after the component mount. So after the user is seeing the page, it will call useEffect, and then that will go off to the database and fetch some data. And then when that comes back, then you would swap out on the page what the user's seeing so that they see a list of all of those results. And so since that's happening before the user sees the first render of the page, it means that you don't need to handle any of those loading states because it's happening off in serverland, and then the first render of your page, you already have that data back, or potentially that empty result set.
Yep, that's great, and it simplifies a lot of things. Sometimes, like if you're on the server, you can talk to the database directly. Like you can, like stuff like secret API keys or stuff like this that don't make it to the client. You're like, I can skip a whole lot of step of having an API that I need to hit from the client. I can just talk to the data directly, grab the last 5 posts, remove what I don't need, like also overfetching. You don't have to worry about fetching too much on the client and then filtering and mapping over the data to just remove what you don't want. You actually do that in the loader, and then you return a nice, tidy stuff, which is exactly what the front end and client needs. And then use loader data, you received it, and iterate over it without having to do any of the filtering and cleaning up because you've prepared it in the loader. It's a really nice approach.
Yeah,
and I think that's
totally.
that's kind of what helped me understand, like the separation, like the context and concerns separated between backend and front end. What makes sense to do on the server, and then to bring minimal information and data and code to the client. So before I was just like, I've learned you fetch data in useEffect or like Ajax request or HTTP XHR request, just find a way to get data. But I never thought, it's actually nice to do it on the server and then only say, hey, front end, if you need it, here's a nicely polished, massaged bundle of data that you can use. And it simplifies the code you write, and it sends less data to the client, which is super nice.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, like your component looks so clean when you don't have to handle all those states, and you don't have to handle like loading, you don't have to handle fetching the data in your component. It means your data, like your component really can be a function of state, which is something that React used to claim. React components are a function of state. So basically when your state changes, then that function gets recalled, and it will always... Yeah, if you have a stateless component, never mind, doesn't matter. Let's not go there. But it means that, like you don't need to handle all of these states, and you're just basically, rendering out what either your empty state is, if you don't get any results, or you're rendering out what your state of that data looks like. Yeah. So the other thing that's really cool about Remix is that if an error happens in the loader, it actually like pipes it through to your component. And so you can handle those errors gracefully in your component, and they are isolated to that particular part of your UI that has failed. So you might have something like, let's say, on the Navbar website that we're building currently, you have like a list of all of the episodes in a column on the left. And then if you click one of those episodes, you have the show notes on the right. And so you always have this column of all of our episodes on the left. And then you can kind of click through each of the episodes to change the panel that's on the right. And so if you had a case like that, and if you were to click one of the episodes and there was some kind of error, usually that would just blow up the whole page if you weren't handling it explicitly. Whereas in Remix, they kind of hand you that error and say something happened down here, but the rest of the application can still function completely fine, which is very cool.
It's probably a good time to mention the Remix landing page, the marketing page. Explains all these concepts beautifully. It's basically like one of these scrolly telling page where you scroll down and UI demos happen, and they show these nested layouts and error boundaries and stuff. Like if They even have that explosion. That's why I thought of just now, like if your app bombs, instead of the whole screen bombing out, they have little bombs going off in the sidebar top right corner, which is the piece of UI that where the fetch failed. And it shows you, oh, well, the rest is still valid. The person can read stuff and click on things to continue navigating instead of like hitting refresh or back button or closing the, like, what's the option when everything has a big JavaScript error thing in the, yeah. So that's nice. That's it. Yeah. If you want a quick snapshot of what Remix can do in a fun and communication, again, like Ryan and team are really good at communicating concept. I think that landing page does a tremendous job as well. Just, this is what we can do. And you just scroll. And by the time you finish scrolling, I think it says, oh, that should be enough. But if you want to learn more, click on there and check the docs. And it's like, at this point, you're pretty much sold if you've scrolled to the bottom, because it solves lots of cool problems.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very cool, very visual version of all of these concerns that it solves. And so, yeah, one of the things that I really liked about like having these loaders and not having a separate thing for, like, not having a separate primitive for get static props is that rather than like obscuring away performance problems with your API or your database, like you still can do that with caching headers if you'd like, and you can still achieve the same thing as get static props, but it's not encouraged, because what you should really be doing there is improving the performance of your API or your database. And so if you've got like, you know, a bit of a bottleneck there, maybe you need to look at something like my latest course on Egghead, caching Supabase data at the edge using Cloudflare workers and KV storage, to learn how you can put a little caching layer between a really slow API and a Remix application. So that's exactly what we're talking about here. But it's really cool that again, like the Remix team is really encouraging you to, rather than just obscuring away these problems, actually like looking at what are some standard ways in the web that we can actually resolve this. Because if you build like a caching layer with any kind of caching solution, you can then reuse that across. If you're building a mobile application and a web app, you can use that same caching layer to improve the performance of talking to your database or talking to your API. Whereas if you use something that is baked into a particular framework that gives you a way to build that page statically, you can't really reuse that across any other framework or any other client applications that you might be building.
Yep, I see a recurring argument here, which is always find the best way to solve it and the most web standards way to solve a solution, instead of like, yeah, I like what a lot of people say, hey, this is great, but if your API is slow, then like if you do a static site, you don't have a problem. And by doing static site, it's thinking, oh, we don't have to fix the slow API or slow database. It was just like another episode we were talking about this new concept of data stream returns. Instead of getting the whole data, it comes in little packets. And I joked that, oh, now devs don't have to worry about overfetching, because just give me everything and then the browser will kind of stream bit by bit. But yeah, I really like that Remix says probably the right thing to do in that situation. Yes, you can do static pages, but how about trying to improve the speed of your API and backend? And then it becomes less of a problem of fetching stuff when the person visits the site, which you inevitably will have to do for personalizations or user accounts and stuff like that. I really like it.
And realistically, like if you do work in a big enterprise company that's been around for a while, they're probably going to have these legacy systems that are really, really, really slow. And it might not be an option to rebuild that entire application, like do a whole re-platform to Next.js or whatever, just so that you can benefit from some of these static building things. But if you take the same approach that Remix is, where it's teaching you to learn how to do this with different things that already exist in the web ecosystem, then you don't actually need to re-platform that application. You don't need to rebuild it with Remix, but you could build a caching layer that improves the performance of your application. So you could build something that sits between the request from your legacy system to whatever that database or API is. You can still cache it at that point. You don't need to actually change anything in the legacy application other than it's now requesting the data from this URL instead of requesting it from this URL. And so like by learning these concepts and learning how to use the fundamentals and the standards and everything that's already available to you, rather than kind of like enclosing everything in this framework and saying this is the only way that you can do it, is if you use our primitives to solve those problems. It gives you much more reusable, realistic, real-world solutions to these problems. So we have loaders, which is where you fetch the data. So that's basically when you're making a GET request to request a particular route of your application. So if you're not aware, when you request any page through a browser, it's making a GET request. So GET is the action that it's using to, or the method, sorry, that it's using to go and fetch that page.
verb.
The HTTP verb that
Uppercase
it's using
get.
to
Very
the uppercase get, which is what your browser does by default, and the only thing your browser can actually do by using the URL bar anytime you make a request to any page, that's making a GET request, and you can't force it to make a POST request without using other tools. So that's always going to call your loader, because your loader is what gets called when Remix receives a GET request. But if you want to be able to receive any of the other requests, so post, put, or delete, then you want to write an action. So again, this lives in the same folder so in Next.js, you have like a little bit of a separation here, where Next.js, you would create an API route, which is in a separate folder in a separate part of your application. In Remix, we co-locate this stuff that's related to the writing and updating and deleting of data, anything that's changing data, or running based on like user input. So they fill out a form and they press save or something like that. That's going to make a post request. And so your action is what is going to be called by Remix whenever the user clicks that button. So actions are for any kind of, for any HTTP verb other than GET. So your loader is called when the page loads, and then your action runs anytime that page or that route receives a post, put, or delete request.
Yep. I like it's kind of like it brings single file component mindset. Like Vue, I think, was the first framework who said, hey, let's have a front-end file where you can have a script with JavaScript and a template with HTML and a style block with CSS. And these are the triangle of front-end. You have everything in one file and it's a single file component. And Remix kind of does that, this single file component with front-end and back-end. So you have the loader and the action and the component all in the same file. Where when we talked about Next.js, get server-side props still lives in the same file, but then your API route is in a different file in /API. It's kind of nice that in Remix, you literally can have the context of a given page, everything it does when it loads at the GET request, and everything that happens when there's interaction and the POST request. It all lives in the same file, and you can scroll up and down. Typically, the file will have loader and action at the top, and then the component itself returned. And once you buy into that mindset, and you go to any page, and you can see, okay, what happens on load, what happens when there's an interaction, if there is any. And also you can have a page without a loader and without an action, and it's just a normal page. But if something happens when it loads or when something happens, it's going to be there, usually at the top of the file. And you just jump in any file and discover this world of what happens for this specific route, and it's super cool.
Yeah. And I think, what was I going to say there? Going to have to edit here. I had something and now my mind's just wandered.
I was that boring. Just like, oh.
No. I had something, and then I looked at something here, and I was like, oh yeah, I need to transition into that.
Think.
What did you just say?
Help, Jonah. I forgot what I said.
What was the end of what you were just saying?
Single file component for front end and back end, or like server and client concerns.
I definitely had something.
Is it back? I was like, yeah.
It's not back. I had something.
Yes, and I said, I like that you just jump in any file and you see.
Oh yeah, okay, I've got it.
Got it. Let's go.
So yeah, the cool thing about that is that you can you can jump to any kind of Remix application and kind of know where to look to find particular things. And so those conventions mean that you can kind of move more freely throughout different Remix applications and feel like it's still familiar enough. Like, you know that if you're looking for a particular page, that it's in the routes directory. And if you're looking for something that page does when you fill out a form and press save, then you're probably looking for an action in that routes folder. In that file in the routes folder.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it kind of, by having these conventions of just good ways to organize your application and organize your code, it makes it really easy to transition to different Remix applications and work on other open source projects or anything else.
Totally.
The other thing that's cool about co-locating those actions and loaders and your component is that you can then just have a list of all of your imports for all of the concerns of that page all in one place. So you have like server-side imports as well as client-side imports at the top. You just import everything, how you normally would in any kind of ESM or common JS application. So any kind of Remix application or Vue or whatever with regular ES6 import syntax.
Yeah.
But then if you use some of that stuff on the server and you don't use it in your component, then it's just going to automatically be excluded from the browser bundle. And so you can have all of your imports for all of the things that you're going to use for both the server-side concerns and the client-side concerns all at the top of your file. But then it's only going to include those libraries in the bits of code where you actually need to run them. So it's not going to bloat out your browser bundle that you're sending to the client by using something like Moment.js to format a date on the server side.
Yeah, this is always great. I like what you said, and convention is good, my friends. Convention usually means opinion, and in the dev world, opinions can be taken with a lot of opinions, I guess. But yeah, I think Ruby on Rails was the team, the people behind that kind of coined this convention over configuration. So like, just adhere to a set of principles and approach and naming stuff. And if you work with Ruby on Rails, like if you name a file a certain way, everything is wired up out of the box, and it makes you super productive. And I think Laravel is another example where you have a file that has the same name than the what is it? There's the MVC, like there's the controller that kind of, if it has the same name, it's going to automatically do these things. And when you have conventions in place, you can jump from project to project and like you feel at home straight away. We had that with the pages directory is a good one. And then all these things that you mentioned just bring this productivity where you feel like you can jump in any Remix project. Okay, what's in the loader? What's in the action? What's in the component? You gain knowledge of this instantly without having to jump into lots of utils and different functions. That's like, yeah, the more organized consistently your code is between projects, the more you have a good time jumping around. And I do think like in the JavaScript world, especially when you did React app with Create React Apps, the whole thing is, hey, you just use pick out pieces that you need. You need Moment.js, you need Date Picker, just pick stuff around. And then you have the freedom to decide if the file in the folder should be index or if it should be main, or if you should like have like organize your stuff like you want on every project differently. And then you can't just jump into one of these projects and be immediately productive, because you have to learn the whole system and thinking and okay, this is the pattern and the convention that's agreed just for this. And I know it's a complete side tangent, but I can't help myself. Tailwind CSS is exactly that for CSS. It's a set of conventions, and you jump to a project and you know how things are supposed to work and what are your options, and you have autocomplete and stuff. And if you look at a custom BEM implementation, and I used BEM for years and I loved it, you need weeks and sometimes months to kind of parse everything and all the decisions that were made and what composes with what and what's for what part. And you can literally spend a month reading CSS to learn the whole system versus jumping in a project, putting utility classes on stuff, knowing of the whole approach. And it's like local versus global state. And this is the end of my side tangent for why Tailwind is a good idea, but it's a good example of how convention can make you incredibly productive.
Totally. And convention over configuration was a huge thing with Rails, and a huge thing for me. I did lots of Rails development, and I kind of went from like Rails project to React project, and then back to Rails project, and then back to React project. So I kind of like jumped. I didn't just go from like, just developing Rails to just developing React. And it was a huge thing that I noticed was like when I was working in Rails initially, like I knew where to jump in to look for things. I knew where everything would be because it's all following that same convention. And then I moved to React, and like we were having meetings about how, like, we were setting up a new project and how are we going to set up the file structure? Like, why are we having a meeting with
about
like
establishing
12
conventions
devs? Of like very like, varyingly high pay brackets, all sitting in a room talking about how we're going to like organize our files in folders. Like, this is just such a waste of time. And so when I like went back to building a Rails application, I was like, this is why these conventions are here. This is it. Like, I just jump in and we don't need to talk about it. We don't need to have these meaningless meetings. We can just like hit the ground running. All of these decisions have already been made for us. We don't need to have these conversations. And I feel like, things like Remix and Next.js and all of these, these either modern frameworks or frameworks built on top of other frameworks are really focusing on giving us some of those conventions so that you don't need to make those decisions yourself. You can just hit the ground running and get started.
Anything that makes decisions for you without blocking you from doing custom, like still breaking out or without just completely removing functionality is great. And Prettier is a great example of that too. You just set a config. You can have a meeting of should we have semicolons. Line width should be 80, 100, 120. You fight about it for a day and then you say, all right, let's just use the defaults or whatever. This is the config. And then no one ever mentions anything ever again, which is good. And while we're on that tangent, which we're going to close, I made a custom comment for the broadcast. I managed to make this episode about Tailwind CSS again. This is something I do. I hijack. Every time there's separation of concern or conventions and productivity, I'm like, let's...
It just shows how amazingly well built Tailwind is, that you can really bring it into every conversation. Every time we talk about anything positive, you can weave in how Tailwind does that as well. So one of the other things that Remix gives us is nested routes. And so this is a way to build those kinds of UIs that I was talking about earlier. So with the Navbar website that we're building at the moment, you have a column for all of the episodes. And then if you click one of those episodes, it loads the show notes on the right panel. And so when you click one of those episodes, it doesn't need to go and fetch the whole page. It doesn't need to make a request for that whole column of episodes again, because it already has the column of episodes. So it only needs to go and get the data for the panel that's changing. And so this is the perfect use case for nested routes, which is basically where you have, nested routes. You have like some routes that are wrapping around other routes or that are always on the page when other routes are active. So if you imagine like, you might have like /settings/ or /dashboard /settings/ name or something like that. And so in that URL, you've got like 3 different routes that are all active at the same time. You're on the dashboard overall page, but then on the dashboard, you're on the like settings menu. And then inside settings, you're looking at the profile name, menu item or whatever. So you have all of those things active all at the same time. But when you click around from like profile name to email address or something like that, like you don't want to have to go and fetch all of that data again for all of those other bits of the page that share the same UI. So nested routes allows you to do that and break up all of your different parts of your page into their own like visual layout, but also their own data fetching logic and actions and all of that stuff.
Yeah, this is really powerful, and it helps to think about it like when you have like drill down data. For example, if you imagine like a basketball website, NBA stuff, so you would have like a list of all the games happening in real time. First of all, because it's in real time, you want to fetch the score, so you don't want to have a static page to start with. But you would have all the games, and then if you click on a game, that sidebar with all the games never, like it stays there, but then in the main panel you have like the game with the current score and each player with their stat, like 7 points, 3 rebounds, 2 fouls. And then if you click on the player, it just goes into that and they have like more details, like info about that player and their stats and their current whatever, like anything that you want to drill down. I think the Remix the marketing page uses an accounting, something like FreshBooks is the perfect use case. Click on clients, and then in clients there's like all the invoices and estimates and expenses. And then if you click on expense, you have a list of just the expenses, and then you click on that one and you have the actual expense. And that's how these sort of apps work. And if you had to display all of that at once, you would have little spinners everywhere, and you would like do a lot more work. It's kind of nice that you have this drill down approach, and what's already rendered doesn't re-render. It's just like the nested layout, that this part of the app is what changes. And then that convention of folder structure to achieve that is also pretty cool and intuitive.
Yeah. And so now, because all of your like data fetching logic is attached to each of those parts of the route, it means that your URL can now tell Remix everything that it needs to fetch before it transitions to that page, which means that it can do some really smart preloading of data stuff, so that it can do really smooth client-side transitions. So if your mouse is like hovering near like in that invoices example, if it's hovering near expenses, it knows, well, that's going to load up the panel of expenses, so I can just go and fetch all of that data. I can even do the like SSR part of rendering this on the server, and I can just send back HTML as soon as the user actually clicks on that. So when they click on it, the HTML is already there rendered, and it just swaps it out, it adds it to the page. And all of that is possible because your whole URL basically describes exactly every component that needs to be loaded at that point, and every single loader that needs to be called to fetch the data for that component.
Yeah, you always hear about local state in React, and then global state and the remote state, which is like data stuff. And one of the different pieces of states that is very important is the browser or route state. Like the current URL carries a lot of information. Like you have the ID of the user and what expense. And Remix using that URL to infer a lot of information about the actual data that you need is awesome. Like it leverages, again, like URL is like one of the foundations of the web, and like you have a lot of state and knowledge and concerns baked in there in that route segment. So use that. It's super cool.
Yeah. So some of the other cool things that Remix has, or I guess a summary of the cool things and why you should use it, is that it uses web standards everywhere, like we were talking about. So you probably learn more about the web than you specifically learn about Remix when you're learning how to build a Remix application. And so as Simon called out at the start, like you spend a lot more time reading MDN articles about web standards than you do reading the Remix docs. And a lot of the Remix docs, they'll have like a little bit of an explanation of something, but then they'll point to MDN where you can go and learn more, because it's just like this one-for-one pairing of like, if they build things supporting web standards, then the documentation already exists. The knowledge of how to use that in a lot of developers already exists. So it just kind of brings up the efficiency for everyone, and also allows you to transfer that knowledge to other projects that you might work on in the future. It also means that they can, like Remix itself, can run in more environments. So more environments can support Remix because it is building on those web standards. And we called this out in the Next.js episode, but there is a group called the Winter CG group, which is all about bringing all of these standards, or creating like a core set of APIs that will exist across all of these different environments. And so when we're talking about different environments, it's where your server-side JavaScript code might run. And so that might be a Node.js environment, that might be a V8 isolates environment, I think is what the Cloudflare one is. That might be Dino on something like Dino Deploy. There are all of these like slightly different environments that now exist for our server-side code. And Winter CG is kind of trying to standardize on a collection of core APIs that will always exist in all of those environments, so that you know if you're building a Remix application and you stick to those particular web standards and those particular APIs, that you will be able to run your Remix application in Cloudflare, you'll be able to run it in Vercel, you'll be able to run it in Amazon, AWS, something. It's kind of like, it helps just push everyone in the same direction as the web development industry, so that we can do even better stuff.
Nicely put. Nicely put.
So the other cool thing is that it, as I was mentioning before, it excludes server things in the client bundle, and it excludes client things from the server bundle. And so it takes care of all of that for you. So again, you can kind of be writing your component with all of the shared concerns of fetching that data and displaying the page. So that one single file contains your loader for what's the fetching the data that you need for your component. It contains the action, which is any kind of like form submitting, like post request data stuff, anything that needs to talk to the database. And then you have your actual component describing how it should look in the browser. And so because you have all three of those very different pieces of stuff in the same file, like you've got some stuff that's running on the server at load time, some stuff that's running on the server at like when the user submits a form, and you've got some stuff that's running in the client browser, you have like three very different environments running there. And so it's really nice being able to just have all of your imports for that route listed at the top, but not need to worry about that like polluting in the areas that it shouldn't be. So if you have like a server-side library that's doing something in your loader or your action, that's not ever going to make it to the browser unless you're explicitly using it in your React component or in your JSX. So handling all of that for you is very cool.
Yeah, that's really good. I don't know what are the scenarios. I think there's ways where you can still accidentally send stuff to the client. And then there's a convention in Remix where you can call the file .server.ts or .js, and then it's like, this is definitely not making it to the, like, because you explicitly opted in the .server naming convention. I'm not sure exactly the scenarios where you might end up sending stuff to your client bundle, but if you want to make sure it doesn't happen, there's that way to handle it. And I'm sure you know what scenario would be.
I'm dealing with that right now, building Remix auth helpers, so some server-side auth helper magic for working with Supabase.
Nice.
And so, yeah, a way to use cookies to do all of the authentication, authorization-y stuff. And yes, I've been running into this exact problem and have recently learned all about appending the file name with .server. And so, yeah, if something does, as Simon was saying, happen to end up in the client bundle that shouldn't, so if you open up your console and you get an error like buffer is not defined or something like that, or some kind of like node API that shouldn't be there in your browser console, then, yeah, if you... rather than just calling that file like about.ts, if you call it about.server.ts, then that tells Remix this should only explicitly run on the server, and it will exclude it from the client bundle. But yeah, they have this really nice, I think it's called Conventions, is the page on the Remix docs, that's just basically like everything else. Here's just like a brain dump of everything that like Ryan and Michael and Chance and Kent, everyone who works on the Remix team, anything that they're thinking of where they're like, oh yeah, like if you were to try and do this in this way, this thing would block you. It all goes in this awesome conventions page, and you can just read through really good examples of like why the thing is happening, and then how you might refactor your app slightly to make it not happen. But yes, they're very good on the education side of things.
Education and clear documentation, like the Remix docs are doing a great job at onboarding you, which I think is one of the key things when you start a journey into a new framework, is like how well is the documentation and resources helping me onboard? The answer is really, really well. For Remix, it's good stuff.
Yeah. The other very cool thing, the last very cool thing, is just that it's open source, like a lot of cool things at the moment in our wonderful, supportive community of web developers. It's a very nice industry to be in. A lot of people are willing to do a lot of work and either give it away for free or at least show you how they did it, which is very cool. So the entire Remix project is open source. So if you do notice a typo in the documentation or anything like that, I highly recommend that you open a PR helping fix it and be one of those awesome community members that makes it even cooler and even better for everyone else. But this also means that you can add to it. You can, like, if there's some cool thing that you wish you could do in Remix that you can't do, you could build that feature and open a PR. and try and get it into the core repo. Or potentially you could fork it and just do whatever you want with it. But just make sure you attribute anything that you might copy, because the team might not mind calling you out in public if if you blatantly copy a whole bunch of stuff. I'll leave that one there. So Simon, what have you been working on this week? Oh, actually, I'm going to jump in before you tell me what you've been working on, and I'm going to drop a huge knowledge bomb here. Big leak. Big announcement. Have you got a button ready?
I don't know which one, though.
Oh, no. Well, you'll have to decide on the spot. Simon and I will be co-emceeing RemixConf in Europe. Hey! So, the conference is entirely online, and it's happening on November 18th. So I recommend you go check out remixconf.eu to go and get tickets. And you will see our friendly, lovely faces quite late at night rather than in the morning, but you will see our faces, and yeah, join us for all of the cool stuff that's going to be at RemixConf. There are a lot of awesome talks from all the superstars like Kent and Ryan and all the people. It's going to be very cool, and I'm excited for it.
Likewise, this is going to be fun. And yeah, I there's nothing I would hate more than emceeing by myself a conference. But when it's co-emceeing, that's when you get into the fun stuff and play off everyone's energy. And it's just like this podcast. Doing it by myself would be scary and boring and all the stuff. But when it turns into like a fun tandem stuff, I like it. And I'm very excited to have this co-MC. This is my first time emceeing any conference of any size, and it's pretty cool. Looking forward.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I was feeling quite nervous about it, and then I twisted your arm to just join me for it, and now I feel like it's just like a Navbar episode, and we'll just have a whole bunch of fun with it. It'll be great.
That's it.
What else have you been working on, Simon?
I am, as always, working on my Pro Tailwind course. Delivered 3 workshops, 1 to go. But before I do this, I'm going to take the time to build it properly by doing user research, talk to people that have real problems and see if we can solve them elegantly. And while this happens, I'm recording the videos for the online self-paced course that John has been asking for months. Basically, instead of doing a live workshop at 6 in the morning, you get to buy access to all the videos, and then you can do one video at lunch break and the next one on Saturday morning or whatever you want. But the approach remains workshop-like. That's why it's called self-paced workshop. So there's me on the camera saying, hey, here's the problem. This is what we're trying to do. Here are a few tips, maybe a few links to some documentation. Good luck, and I'll see you in the solution. And then the idea is like you've seen that, and then some code editor comes up and you try to solve a problem. And then I walk you through my solution and how I implemented it being one of many possible solutions. But I think it's more interesting than just watching videos of me building something. But also, if that's what you just wanted like walkthrough videos, you can skip the intros and just watch the solutions. So for each challenge, you just watch the solution, and essentially you have like just a narrated build of the whole thing. But if you choose to approach it as a workshop, then you pause and you think and you look at docs, and that's how you learn things much deeper than just watching me and think, oh yeah, he made it sound easy, and then 2 days later you forgot and you have to rewatch the video. So yeah, it's a workshop, but it's like in a video format, and I'm gonna push forwards recordings through all of that over the coming weeks and months, and I'm super excited.
I am super excited as well. Yeah, very, very keen for that to come out and not get up at 6 a.m. to take your workshops. It's going to be great.
Very important, there will be cute little corgi illustrations across the thing somewhere. I'm not sure if it is not official yet, but there's discussions, and every time I look at this discussion and the little mood board, I just get so happy inside, and I think that when it happens, you will be happy too.
I have seen a secret preview of this mood board, and I can confirm that it does make me very happy. So I'm excited for that. I think it's going to be very cool. I highly recommend you go check out my Egghead courses. There is one on caching Supabase data at the edge using Cloudflare Workers and KV storage, which is all about actually a lot of stuff that we talked about in this episode. And when you have some kind of slow API or slow data source, how do you fix that? If you have a Remix application, you want to make a request to something that is just slow and you don't have the ability to change how slow that is or improve the performance, how do you do something like building a caching layer in between that allows you to much more efficiently request data from that resource? So I highly recommend you check out that one. I am currently redoing my SAS course, Egghead course. So if there is something that you think was missing from that course or something that you would love to know how to do in Supabase, then please DM me and let me know, because it could very well make it into the course if you're quick.
Nice.
But thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, my name is John Myers. You can find me at johnmyers_io on Twitter.
And I am Simon Vrashliotis at Simon Swiss on Twitter. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned a lot. I did. And we will see you, hear you. You will hear us next week at the same time, or maybe not. See you later.
Bye. Oh, I nearly hit the hang up button then. Gotta not do that. We're not actually saying goodbye yet.
No, another 6 hours of planning now.
Yeah.
I always say, like, talk to you next week, but they say, we will hear you next week. It's like, no, we don't hear anyone. It's
Yeah, that's right.
you, listener, that hears us.
That's right.
That
was fun.
Yes,
we
it
did
was.
2 over-an-hour episodes.
Oh, hey, do we, like, if we decide that anything above 30 minutes should be split, it's like a convention, you know? And then that means we recorded 4 episodes and we, like...
We could do that, if you'd like. What do you reckon?
Like, if it's one episode that's 40 minutes, like the one on Supabase that's perfect. It's just like... But
Yeah.
when it goes beyond 40, like, if it's an hour 10, it's like...
Yeah.
I can...
Okay.
Even myself, when I walk the dogs, I've heard it, so I'm not like, oh my God, learning stuff.
Hurry up, guys. Get to the point.
Yeah, I'm like...
Get to the end of the episode.
I would just skip, like, I literally take and I slide the timeline until the end. Yeah, maybe that's an open question we should ask the community.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. And I think it's good for us just, like, scalability-wise. Like, I think we got pretty close to the wire having... Well, yeah, I still need to edit the episode tonight that goes out, that's meant to go out today, that will go out tomorrow. So, yeah, anything we can do to get more ahead. And also, Christmas time. We're probably going to want to take a decent Christmas break and hang out with family.
I think
and
that's
not think
fine
about
to
work
say,
things.
like, Shop Talk Show and stuff that are always on. They, like, when it comes Christmas, they're like, this is the last episode and we'll start. But, like, it's fine to do stuff without publishing and take a break. Not just have to fill episodes to survive that break.
We gotta work extra hard now, so we're allowed to take our break later. No, you're right. We can definitely.
But yeah,
take breaks anytime.
We start like that. That wasn't 10 o'clock. That was like 10:15 this week because I was driving my daughter. But it's like 1:30 now, so it's like almost half a day. Like we spent nearly 4 hours, 3.5 hours recording. So it kind of like if it's 4 episodes, it's like. Yeah, you do that.
Yeah.
It buys you a month.
Worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, like, I'm more thinking for the user. Like, no, actually, I'm thinking about me. But if we can twist it to the audience, like, listening experience, anything above 1 hour is like it's almost too much. And I bet some people
agree.
just stop, and then when they start again, maybe I'll switch to a new podcast because it's a bit outdated, or like it's hard even at 2x speed to go through.
Yeah. I like it. All right,
So
let's make that the rule. If it goes over an hour, we'll split it into 2 30-minute episodes. If it's 45 to 1 hour, we'll make a call based on what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Sick.
Nice.
All right. I should
But now
go
you're
and
gonna
have...
edit the bits out, and it's gonna be 59 minutes.
That's true.
But then anything past 45, we're allowed to decide.
Yeah. Yep.
That was
Well,
the
yeah, we'll see
convention.
what they are when I edit them up. Because
Yes.
they are, I do all I don't know if you've noticed, but I do all this, or I was doing it manually initially, but like edit out all the silence between everything. And so there's like really nice tools in Logic, which is what I use to edit the podcast or any kind of audio stuff. And so I put it in there, I usually go through and like manually chop every transition between us to try and like chop off the bits where we talk over each other, and try and make it as smooth as possible for all the transitions, which is usually fine because like I talk for a big chunk, then you talk for a big chunk, then I talk for a big chunk. So it's like it's really easy to find those bits
Just
where we
the awkward,
transition.
like, what, you go, you know.
Yeah,
So-
I get rid of all of those things so they don't
Yeah.
make it into the audio recording. But then once I do that and I put a limiter on all of it and then export it all, then I can drop it back in and say, okay, just like find all of the silences up to this threshold and just like delete the clips. And so then it's like a whole bunch of chunks of little clips. And then I can press another hotkey and it just like crushes them all together, like moves all of the, removes all the silence. And it's so much faster. It's so nice having that.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Do you mute the person that's not talking, or there's a noise gate or something that kind
Sometimes I usually just like quickly scan through it, and like Logic makes it pretty easy with these tools to like there's one where you can just like drag over a collection of the waveform and then just press delete. So it's like a cursor that you can just drag over and say, I just want to delete this part. So it's kind of like an eraser or whatever. You just go erase this part of the waveform, erase this part of the waveform. So usually if someone else is talking, I can usually tell by just looking at the waveform if it's one of us just saying like, yep, or something like that, which I'm like, yeah, we can just cut those out. But if it's like laughing in response to something, or if it's
you want to keep that.
Yeah. Or if it's like obvious that one of us is saying something to validate the other, then I keep those bits. But anything that's either sips of water or coughs or...
Like
every
time I stopped talking, I would mute myself, thinking it picks it up a little bit. So I was like, I don't want you to... Oh, you don't want the helicopter in my feed going through your voice?
Anything like that gets cut,
Okay, cool.
And one day when we're rich enough and we have a successful enough podcast, we can outsource that to someone else.
Well, we are 1,000 or maybe 10,000 episodes short of like feeding. Have you seen that podcast.ai thing with Steve Jobs and Joe Rogan?
No.
Okay, we gotta keep that. Oh, we should have talked about this in the open bar. Just go podcast.ai. It's like artificially intelligence generated podcast, and it's Joe Rogan interviewing Steve Jobs, who's dead. And it's...
Did you say podcast.ai?
I think so.
Mine's not coming up with anything.
Basically,
maybe I don't have any internet connection. Simon,
fed...
how am I talking to you without an internet connection? That doesn't make sense.
Oh, the site is actually not working. Yeah, the site is broken.
Huh.
Anyway, so they fed the machine every single episode of Joe Rogan and every voice recording of Steve Jobs ever, like they could find, like thousands of hours.
Yeah.
And then they generatively generated the text version of an interview between Joe Rogan and then the AI generates the voices. Like the voice, it's literally Joe Rogan and Steve Jobs. They sound exactly like in...
That's crazy.
It's just the discussion is a little bit, you can pick up when it's like they talk it almost like they rehearse. I agree with you. This is a really good point. Like it's a little bit too narrated, but like Joe Rogan speaks just like he's like, it starts, he goes, "What's up, bitches? Today I have a really special guest." And but it's Joe Rogan. Like you could fool even his best friend would be like, yeah, that's my friend Joe. Like it sounds absolutely exactly like him. And if you listen to the whole thing, you just completely forget that it's not real. And then Steve Jobs talks about stuff that happens, like talks about COVID and stuff, and you're like, hey, hang on, what? It's just so true. And then cool. they've done this one as a like a pilot demo, and then they said, what should we do next? And people are like Michael Jordan in interviews like a player that died before his generation, or like Donald Trump in interviews himself. And there's one with like Buddha and Elon Musk, like some crazy stuff, and you're like, just see what the machine thinks the conversation would be and where it would go. But it like
so cool.
Normally these things sounds absolute garbage, just the tone of voice, and then some of the things that happen in the discussion. It's like, hang on, how did AI came up with like it sounds like an absolute real conversation, and there's a joke, and the other one laughs. Like it feels so genuine. It's not just like you think Steve Jobs just tell his story. Yeah, I've done this, and then when we created the Mac, we did this and that, and then I got fired. Just tell the story based on the Wikipedia page or whatever. But it goes into topics like it sounds so real, and like that guy's dead, and then you think, okay, it's the real Joe Rogan talking to the robot, and then no, the actual Rogan is also fake. It's so trippy. You gotta find. It wasn't.
And now you know how we do the Navbar podcast.
So that I was listening to that, and the whole time I was like, you just keep talking, and then feed the machine, and then we can say what is remix, and duration 40 minutes, and But it's scary. But that is going to happen, and like content creators like us, like even video and like you see all the art stuff. Did you see someone feed Ken Wheeler's face photos to a machine, and then like do it in Monet style or Rembrandt or like Van Gogh,
right.
And you would have these hilarious Ken Wheeler paintings in the style of the painter, and it's like
awesome.
Oh my god, like it's scary, but it's coming. So I feel like now we can already cut off the silences, but we can very soon just choose topics and fill up the Trello board, and then it just generate, like instead of ready to record is like sent to AI.
Yeah.
Like processing.
What would we say about Solid.js? And it can just do it for us.
And then you can learn about yourself, see how you that's what I would say. Okay, I'm an asshole. Like I didn't think I was like that.
Wow, that's a lot of swears.
Yeah, or like the rant at the start of today's episode about, I don't even know what it was.
Yeah. All right, buddy. Let's go have some lunch.
We're still live, by the way. But we
thank you all for joining us for the live one. And it's a lot of podcast recording.
Yes, I expect you to disappear before the fade out fades back in, because otherwise we'll talk again.
Yeah. No, I'll make sure
before
that we
was
don't
perfect.
have to talk again.
I'm telling John if he leaves too early, it kind of messes up the stream. But then if he reappears, we're like, oh, you're still here, and we start talking for another 20 minutes.
We've got to be polite and have another conversation. Yeah, it'd be rude to just leave once I can see Simon's
We both
face
like,
again. So
damn it, I really don't. But
as soon as the lights go out, I have to disconnect.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. Have a lovely week, and we will see you again next one. We won't see you, man. We need to fix these.
You will
outros.
see us.
You will see us on the next one, and the podcast listeners will hear us on the next one. Goodbye.
Bye.